Welcome back to another episode of The W Number. Today I'm gonna have a fire story for you, and it's not your average story, man. It's not your average story of recovery. It's a story of hope, addiction, and just the overall despair that you go through when you're using drugs in your prison sentence and you can't get out of it, and you're in a constant stream of agony and using, and you just can't get out of that cycle. Today we're going to talk about my recovery story from the beginning into the end, from the day I walked into prison to the day I walked out of prison. Even when I got out of prison, what I did then. Drugs are not your typical drugs. These drugs make you hallucinate. They make you go crazy. But also, there is hardcore drugs I was doing, like heroin and fentanyl, boxing. But this isn't just an average recovery story. This is the story of me getting in drunken brawls in prison, drunken fights, high fights, stabbings, and things like that. Things that would have never happened if people weren't getting high. Like, if I wasn't getting high, or drunk for that matter. Before we start, I want to kick it off with a verse from the Bible, because this is God's mission here. This is God's mission. God's got big plans for me, so I'm going to give it right back to Him the way He gave it to me. It's going to continue to stay like that, so if you don't like it, you know where to go. Ways, bro. So, this is called Micah, chapter 7. Misery turned to hope. How miserable I am. I feel like the fruit picker after the harvest. I can find nothing to eat. Not a cluster of grapes or a single early fig can be found to satisfy my hunger. The godly people have all disappeared. Not one honest person is left on the earth. They are all murderers, setting traps even for their own brothers. Both their hands are equally skilled at doing evil. Officials and judges alike demand bribes. The people with influence get what they want, and together they scheme to twist justice. I'm gonna stop it right there because nothing more needs to be said. Man, all you dirty judges out there, all you dirty friggin' lawyers and district attorneys that just want to see motherfuckers in misery and in pain inside a prison cell for no fucking reason other than the fact that you just need to get re-elected, and fuck you, for real. So, my recovery story starts in 2006. I just turned 19 and I got locked up in the Barnstable County Correction Center. Now, when I was in there, I was drinking prior to my arrest. Let me take you back. So, right before I got arrested was the first day I'd be sober for about 2 years. And I had stayed sober because the night before I smacked a dude with a 2x4 in the face and almost killed him. And I was thinking in my head, like, if I don't stop this, it's gonna end me up in prison for the rest of my life. So I don't want that. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to go to prison for the rest of my life, dude, over drinking and just being a fool. So I went to 2 NA meetings that same day. And that night, when I was sitting in my house, I'd been with my girl, and you know, we were in the middle of doing our thing and everything, and I went to prison for blue balls. terrible. It just, you know, an omen for the time that was yet to come. So I go to jail. They raided my house. They didn't kick the door in, but they banged the door in, and they got me in my underwear, dragged me out of the house, and threw me in the back of the cruiser. And let me tell you something. That was the first time I slept restful sleep that entire 2-year sentence. I mean, that entire time I was on the run for 2 years. That was the first time I slept in restful night's sleep that entire time. So I'm in the back of the cruiser sleeping. I get to the county jail, and I go in, and I had just been drinking for 2 years, so I'm in there and I'm drying up now. I had been taking Xanaxes and drinking, and so there's no drugs in there, and I'm not thinking in my head I'm gonna look for drugs. So I'm sure there is drugs, but I'm not looking for them. So I'm gonna fast forward to the parts that I'm using and getting in trouble over it. So I go through this whole sentence, and as long as I'm in the county, I don't get high. In 2008, when I got sent to the max, That's when I started getting high. So when I first get to the max, I'm going up there and I'm hearing stories about how there's drugs in the whole system, like it's flooded in there, and people are just using all over the place, and there's this, there's that, and it's cheap. It's just like the streets up there. And so I'm like, I'm thinking in my head before I go up, I'm like, yeah, man, I can't wait so I could get high, you know, and drown away my misery. So I get up there, and the first thing I do is I'm looking around trying to find drugs. Crazy, right? Like I'm not looking around trying to find a program. I'm not looking around trying to find something good to do with myself. I'm looking around to see if I can get high and get out of my head for a little while. The system's almost built like that because you're in such a shitty frame of mind that you don't really care about staying sober. Like, that's not my mission. My mission is to not have to feel while I'm in prison. You know what I mean? I don't want to have to feel this pain inside my chest, the hurt that's within me. And so I go to N2. The first block I got sent to was N2. I get over there, and this old timer teaches me how to make homebrew. I'm making homebrew for myself. It takes about 2-3 days to finish off, and it's fire, man. I'm starting to drink and having a good time, and I do it a few times. I share it with my friends, and I start to build a little circle. And my circle is made up of other white dudes who have like mind. It's me. Like, I like to fight. I'm young, and I don't want to hang around with old lames that don't want the bullshit, because that's not. I'm into the bullshit. I wanted to make a name for myself. That wasn't my main aim, to make a name for myself. My main aim was to respect. In doing that, you make a name for yourself. So in my head, I'm thinking, I just want respect. I want motherfuckers to fear me, and I want to get everything I need and live a comfortable big. So I start drinking, and then a month into it, I get drunk one night with this kid Boo and some other person, and I belligerent. I tell the cops, I get belligerent, and I start bugging out. I'm like, in the book, I'm laying in my bed wasted, and I'm telling the guy next door to me, yo, this prison sucks. I want to go to Walpole where everybody's at, and everything's going on over there. It's live. I want to be in that prison because this prison's boring. It's just full of like old school cons that want to do their time and be left alone and get good time, whatever it is, man. It wasn't for me. I wanted to go where the bullshit was. So I'm telling my neighbor, like, I'm out of here, man. I'm going to Walpole. So I start throwing books at the sprinkler head from laying in bed drunk. And I'm throwing books at the sprinkler head, and I'm throwing shoes, sneakers, whatever else I could find. Like, I got a little pile next to my bed, throwing it at the sprinkler head, trying to pop it from my bed without even moving. I'm in my underwear now. So I'm like, you know what? It's not working. So I get up, I grab the toothbrush, I stand on the sink, and I'm like, I hit it. When I hit the sprinkler head with the end of the toothbrush, I slipped and I fell back on my ass. Boom! Real hard on the bed, on the toilet seat, and then I hit the ground on my back. And now the sprinkler water's flying over my head, and there's black oil all in the water, so it's getting in everything. I took all my stuff and put it in the locker before I started this, but the locker's not waterproof, so all my shit got wet, and it was flooding, and the cops don't know what's going on yet because no one does this type of shit there. If you're popping sprinklers and stuff like that, it's usually in the hole where people are ripping out and shit. But I'm in a regular block, and I'm going in, and so the cops don't even know to do a round yet. So the cops start doing a round randomly after like a little while. The fire alarm's still going off. Don't know where to look, so they're like thinking maybe it's a false alarm. They get to the back of N2 now because they waited so long. The water is just flooded through the whole back of the tier, and everybody had blocked the bottoms of their doors up because I told them what I was gonna do. And everybody's starting to bang on the door now. Yeah, Maddie. And so they come to my door, and they want the little metal pin that came off of the sprinkler head. And so I got it in my hand, and this dude, Citro, a CEO named Citro, he's like, Maddie, give me back the pin. And I'm like, nah. He's like, give me back the pin. I'm like, fuck you. He's like, give me back the pin, Maddie. I'm like, you know what? I'll play a game with you. Deal or no deal. and I yell real loud. I'm like, I yell real loud. I'm like, you say that you popped my sprinkler, and I was just laying in my bed innocent when it popped. I'll give you back this pin. What do you think? Deal or no deal? And everybody on the tier yelled, no deal! And I go through a bunch of different things. I'm like, how about this? You tell them that there was a malfunction and the sprinkler had popped and I had nothing to do with it. I'm innocent. And I'm like, what do you think? Deal or no deal? And everybody's yelling, no deal! And I do this like 3 or 4 times, like all these stupid scenarios that just are not gonna fly. And I'm wasted, so I'm just having fun. And I got the whole block playing deal or no deal with me. And so cop finally gives up. He's like, you know what, whatever, man. Walks away. He sits at the table at the end of the tier and waits for the move team to come to the block. Now, when everybody's yelling out instructions, Maddie do this, Maddie do that, to fight the move team and shit. Now I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I fought the move team. I know how to do this, man. You know, I don't need instructions on how to do this. So move team gets to the tier and I'm in my underwear and get to the door and they're like, inmate Matthew Tottenham, come to the door and cuff up. You've been authorized to use chemical agent and force to remove you from the cell, blah blah blah. And I'm like, fuck you, I ain't going out, you know what I mean? And so they ended up, long story short, they ended up cutting, opening the door. They run in. I charge the door, boom, hit the shield. And you got this scrawny 19-year-old kid who does nothing but work out, and I'm wiry and I'm wrestling around with them. I get one of them sitting ass first into the locker and they lift my legs up and it was a wrap from there. So they beat my ass and they dragged me up to the HSU and I'm wasted, so I'm talking smack to everybody and I'm hitting on the nurses and shit, and they're all getting a kick out of it, you know, ha ha ha, it's real funny. But really inside, I'm dying inside. I had this pain deep down in my heart that was so deep and so dark that no alcohol could fill that hole. Nothing could fill that hole. It was a bottomless pit. Misery and depression and anxiety, fear. Because let's keep it real, bro. When you're in a real joint, you do have fear. No matter how tough you are, there's that little fear that you're gonna be, you know, not liked, or you're gonna be, someone's gonna catch you sleeping, stab you in the neck, or just any little thing could, you have those little creeping fears. But if you're strong like I was, you don't let those thoughts overpower your everyday actions, and you just keep it pushing and put a soldier face on. And you know what, after a while you forget they're even there. They're still always there. It's what keep you alive. Those little fears keep you alive. But if anybody's gonna keep it real with you, it's gonna be me. And I have little creeping fears and doubts in myself, despite the fact that I am a solid dude and I'm a good dude and I carry myself very well and people like me. There's still those little creeping doubts, like, oh, what if they don't like me? What if I'm not tough enough? What if I'm not built like that? And that's when you're real young, especially those thoughts. They creep up on you. But like I said, you gotta put that soldier face on and you keep it pushing and you don't let it affect you. That's, if you let fear creep in and overtake those thoughts, that's when you have a problem. You know what I mean? That's a coward, you know? And I'm not a coward. I'm in the hole and I wake up from that night and I'm hungover bad. And I'm gonna keep it more real now on this podcast in front of the entire world than I ever have in my life. And I'm gonna tell you right now that I cried. I was so distressed and so distraught in my mind that I cried because I was in isolation in the max for the first time. I was 19 years old and I was supposed to be serving a county sentence, but because I kept on getting in fights with the COs and fights with other convicts and just overall madness, I don't know what it was that took over me, but it was a powerful feeling where I felt despair. Like I just felt hopeless, like I'm never gonna get out of here. And I let that get to me at the time. I was in the hole by myself. I didn't know anybody on the tier, and I sat in my cell and I cried like a little bitch. There it is, folks. The big, strong Maddie Tottenham warrior everybody knows. Yeah, I cried in my cell because I didn't have anybody and I didn't know how long I was gonna end up being there for. And as much as I wanted to go to Walpole with all the bullshit, when I woke up hungover that night, or that morning, sorry, I let a wave of emotion overcome me, and I was a little depressed at my situation. And they let me out of the hole 7 days later. I didn't drink while I was up in the hole, but when I got back down to pop, the first thing I did was get a bottom and make a batch. And I started another batch right away. They put me in a cell right up close to the desk in the handicap cell in P2, because they wanted to keep an eye on me, because they could tell I was a live wire at the time. You know, I had been, you could just talking to me for 10 seconds, I'm not the same person I am now. I was a live wire. You talk to me and you could tell right away, like, this kid's a ticking time bomb. Like, I had a hair across my ass about any little thing you say, something stupid, and I'm hooking off. It was just no thought put into my actions at all. I would think later, do first, think later. And I learned when I was a real young kid that if anybody calls you a bitch or a punk, you swing, doesn't matter what the consequences are going to be. And today, that's not who I am. You know what I mean? Now, I'm not going to let anybody walk around calling me a bitch or a punk, but I don't look for those issues like that anymore. And as a matter of fact, something happened today. I'll get to that at the end. But so anyways, I go to P2. I'm in the handicap cell, and I'm making my booze. Late at nighttime, the cops doing a round, and I got all these cups on top of the desk, and I'm drinking them, shooting them back, and the cop walks past, looks in. I could tell, like, I heard his footsteps stop, so I take the cups and I start putting them back behind the toilet real quick, and then I take the batch, I put it back real quick. But he comes back to the window, looks in, and they're all gone, and I'm just standing there with one cup in my hand, but he can't see inside of it, so it just looks like coffee. And I'm looking at him like, what's going on? And he's just like, and then just keeps it moving, right? And so I don't know if he could smell something or something, or if he actually saw all the stuff on the thing, but if he did, he didn't know, he couldn't put a finger on it at the time, I guess. So he leaves, right? Then a little while goes by, and I'm in that cell, and I'm doing good, a little better anyway, and I didn't get any fights, I didn't fight the mood team, and I didn't get called any booze, so they put me back in cell 19 on the back of the tier, all the way in the back with all my friends. Now, I had all my boys down there, but I'm not going to start naming names. Just all my friends were back there. Every other cell was a white dude. Every single other cell on that block was a white dude, and we had one of the most solid white tiers in the entire camp. Since then, I've never seen a block like that, but that was a serious ass block, and that's what set the stage for that prison brawl that I put in the video about my brother. That fight right there happened right at this time, so I get moved back there. A few weeks go by, we're playing football. We got a football league out in the yard. We're playing football, and I had a batch going in my cell, and I had kept it in my mattress so that the cops didn't find it and stuff like that. But when I was out at yard, now the batch was taking a little while to turn over. Someone was paying me to make a batch for their birthday. They gave me big bricks of sugar and a bunch of tomatoes juice and all this other shit, and I was making some red eye for his birthday, and you know, obviously I'd get half for free, and I got paid. So I'm making this batch, and it was taking a little while to turn over, and when I was out in the yard, the thing blew up for the first time. While I was out in the yard, my mattress must have looked like a mountain, so the cop Phelps came in my cell and took the batch, and when I came back from the yard, I got lugged. And then the next morning, that big gym fight popped off over the handball with Jerry and Peoples, and it sparked over who was next on the handball court, and I was like pissed because I wanted to be in that shit so bad, bro. That was like glory in a basket. So I was pissed that I missed it, but you know, shit happens, and so they moved me over to L2, the orientation unit. I'm in orientation, I'm still drinking. My addiction's starting to get crazy now because people are showing me that, you know, there's these little pills that you could do inside the prison that they give you that aren't necessarily considered drugs yet, but they get you high. So I start sniffing Wellbutrin's, and I start taking Neurotins. Right now, to this day, Neurontin, I cannot get with the fact that they are a class C drug or whatever the hell they made it. They made it a narcotic. It just doesn't make sense to me, dude. Those things do not get you high. They just make you feel like you're in a better mood, right? But I did sniff Wellbutrin's, and I was starting to take morphine sulfates and other opiates that I had never done before. So my addiction starting to spiral, and inside, but I started to feel this like growing, that hole just kept on getting deeper and deeper, and the less an identity I felt like I actually had, the more I lost myself in that prison system. And I didn't feel like I had my family, like the love, like I didn't remember who I was, because who I am is I'm a loved son of my mother. I'm not a convict or a prisoner. Like, that is not my identity. That is just where I was. I couldn't connect myself to my prior life. And that's a huge mistake people make when they're in prison, is they can't connect themselves to their prior life. They lose sight of who they really are, and they get lost in the politics. So I got lost in the politics, and I lost sight of who I really was. I lost the feeling of love I had, that connection to my family and to my friends on the streets, because everybody left me for dead. They forgot about me. My friends were banging my girl. My girl was just doing whatever. She stopped writing me because one of my friends wifed her up and then fucking told her not to write me. It was just a shitty feeling, man. And I had like nothing going for me, because I had a freeze on my account from getting caught with the booze, and I couldn't buy my own canteen anymore. I started sending money to other people's accounts to use their account, and I had to pay them a little bit at the end to buy me canteen, and I kept on getting lugged to the hole back and forth and losing that money. So you have less and less as you go on. You just keep on losing stuff as the cops take it away, and move from this tier to that tier, and you're just losing stuff the whole time, and you can never get it back because they don't allow you to use your account. So inside me, that despair is getting deeper, and I'm just really, really depressed. And I'm using drugs to cover this all up, and it doesn't get any easier. I start taking these pills, and the pills are allowing me to feel like I have not as much anxiety. So I get sent to I get sent to G2 after I go to L2, and I start using the pills and stuff like that. And when I'm in G2, I get introduced to a whole new crew of people, like all the Southie guys and my friend Benny, Kevin, all these guys that are good dudes, man. And I just learned a whole different type of convict. Like, dudes are the old school cats, and they're all mad chill. Like, they're awesome dudes. And I was excited to be over there because one of them is a good friend of my neighbor on the streets. And they talk to each other all the time, and he had told him to look for me in there and to look out for me and shit like that. So I was with somebody I actually knew, and I couldn't be more appreciative at the time, because I'd been a little while since I had been with anybody that I actually knew and liked. So I started hanging out with them, and they were all getting high too. So this is around the time when Suboxone started creeping into the system, and we started doing Suboxone. So Suboxone is like a little stop sign shaped pill at the time. It's like the octagon stop signs, and we're crushing them up and just sniffing like a quarter of it and getting wrecked. And then people learn that you could even do less, like an eighth or a 16th of a pill, and get wrecked. So it introduced a whole new era to the prison system, especially when they took it and changed it over to strips. And you could bring hundreds of them in a little package the size of a Jolly Rancher. And there was no beating the money you could make off of all them little strips. So people were bringing in huge packages of Suboxone, and you could sell an eighth of a pill, or at the time, I think it was $15. But it went soon, it would skyrocket up to $50. And it's just massive money maker for somebody who's hustling inside the joint. So at the time, people had to get only 10 at a time, and you could still break it down into quarters and sell the quarters for $20 a piece and make a good amount of money. And that's 4 quarters off of every pill, off of 10 or 20 of that, however many you're bringing in. And people were smashing it up and cutting it with clonidine and, making more out of it. So, there was always ways to finagle it and make more. So I start using and drinking, and comes to a point where I'm fighting my cellmates, and me and my boy Drew were in the cell together. And so I one night, he had went and tried to buy some pills off of this dude, and dude told him, nah, money on the wood. Now, we had never heard of this before. So it was always a respect thing. Like, if you go and ask somebody for something, they give it to you based on the fact that they respect you and will rely on the fact that your name could carry the weight of your money. And there was no stunt pulling. If you pulled a stunt, you were getting smashed out everywhere you go. So he didn't rely on that at all. Like, there was no such thing as money on the wood. So when this kid said it, my friend took it seriously disrespectful. When he came back to the cell, he's telling me, yo, fuck this bitch ass motherfucker, bro, told me money on the wood, can you believe it? And so on my head, I'm just listening, and I'm like, you know what? I go down. As soon as the doors pop, I didn't tell my boy nothing. So as soon as the doors pop, I go down to this kid's cell, and I tell him, yo, man, I want everything you got. And he's like, what? Now I see him start feeling around on his waistband like he's looking for a piece. Like, so I'm like, you know what, dude, fuck that. And I hook off, boom, smashed this kid out real bad. I kicked his head into the desk, and I split his head, across the whole top of his head. And he had to have stitches and staples or whatever put in his head. But we didn't get caught for the fight. So my boy comes in the middle of the fight, and he's like a referee in this shit because he sees me winning bad. And funny, man, the little dude from New Hampshire that like had this huge case, this cops case. Like he shot at the cops. He took hostages and pulled himself up in the top floor of a house and was shooting back at the cops and shit. This kid was an awesome kid, but yeah, he came in, he's like refereeing, like, oh, like it was funny. But the kid ends up going to the HSU. Now I'm starting to realize my drinking is getting me in trouble. This is when my drinking starts taking effect in my drug use. So I start getting out of control. I'm drinking and getting in fights now. I get sent to the hole a little while after this, or I was beamed out taking a bunch of Klonopins. They called me to the desk for disciplinary report hearing. And it was this Spanish lady I had never seen before. So I go to the desk, not thinking anything of it, thinking, who is this lady? She doesn't even have the uniform on that they usually wear. So I go to the desk and I'm like, what's up? And she tells me, I go to this little office here. I'm like, okay. Now I'd just been licking the wrapper of a Klonopin pack, and I'm already all beamed out and shit. And they pull me over there. I'm not thinking in my head, and I got a knife in my pocket. So when they tap my shoulder, and instinctively, like the cattle I was, I fucking put my arm up like this and to do the little pat down, not thinking, and he taps the knife and he goes, what's this? And so I'm like, oh, okay. And I reach in my pocket thinking it was my wallet, and I pulled it out halfway because I had made this stupid square handle because it was a shorter knife. So I made a square handle. And I pulled it out, and the keyboard lady seen it. So I put it back in my pocket and reached across the front of my thing, trying to be slick. And the cop caught the move when I showed him the thing. He's like, no, this pocket. I'm like, oh. And I grabbed the knife, the end of it through my pants. And I grabbed the string that I had wrapped around the handle, and I start unraveling the handle, and I'm pulling out all this string. I'm like, oh, I don't know what it is. I pulled all this string out of my pants, and finally the thing caught and wouldn't pull anymore, and the handle didn't just pull off. The fucking knife pulled out of the sheath. And I was holding it, and it pulled it right out of the sheath, and it's dangling by my side, and by this string, like a knife on a string, and it's just dangling there. And the cop just grabs it. He's like, "What the fuck?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Lock in." I'm like, "Hell no, I ain't locking in." And so I go around the block. I'm telling people like, "Yo, my bad, man. I just got caught with a banger. I'm gonna get lugged and shit." And everybody's giving me cups of booze and this and that to go to the hole with, and they're telling me, lock in. I'm like, fuck you. I ain't going in, dude, until the end of rec. You know what I mean? Then you can come get me. I take the rest of my rec, and then the cops come in, they grab me, and they put me up in the hole. When I'm in the hole for this one, now they're thinking maybe I might be a little crazy. So they don't know I'm taking Klonopins and Xanaxes and shit and getting all beamed out and fucking not even knowing what the hell I'm doing. So they think I'm losing my mind or something. So they start giving me pills. They give me Adderall, and they give me Klonopins. They gave me the Klonopins. They gave me Neurontin and Wellbutrin, and I'm on all this cocktail of pills. And I start drinking in the hole, making booze in the hole, and I'm ripping out, fighting the move team, and double bunking starting, and it's just this wicked, crazy mixture of things, and it fucked me up in the head really bad going through all that while I was just using and getting fucked up, and the prison was having its effect separately without the drugs, you know what I mean? And double bunking situation, especially, but it was more than that, man. Like, it was like, so I get out of the hole, I go back to the other side of the prison, and I'm drinking now. I'm with some serious dudes now. The prison got a lot more serious when they moved Walpole and integrated it into this prison. When they shut Walpole down and made it classification and doubled up the max, so all the guys from Walpole came over. A whole nother dynamic came with it. All those young kids that I was looking forward to hanging out with over there came over here, and we had a cauldron of just violence and drugs. And it was out of control. For a long time, there was stabbings every single day. You know, cops got knocked out every single day. You know, it was just madness. Cops were getting stabbed and sliced and diced and fucking every which way you could chop it up, man. Something was happening every day. So I'm drinking one night. I had drank like 10 bottles of booze and took like 10 pills. And this kid, I'm sitting on the phone talking to my mom, and this kid sitting next to me, and I had heard that he was a sex offender. So I put my arm around him like this, and I pull him in like that, and he's sitting on the trash barrel in between the phones. Like, why you would be there, I have no idea, but he was a little too close to me. So I'm like, you know what, I grab him like this, and I'm like, yo, I heard you were a vicious Skinner. And fucking the dude's like, pops up, he's like, yo, prove everything fucking here, bro. Nah, not for nothing, it was true, but I guess it was like he was with the people that did it and didn't, I don't fucking know, but it wasn't, for me, I was just, that was enough for me. So I grabbed him up like that, you know, he hops up, and so when he hops up, I'm like, oh yeah, you want something? I was double fisted, I had 2 big knives on me. So I step into my cell, which was like right there, and I pulled him out halfway, like, what's up, bro? You want a problem, bro? What's up? And he comes to the doorway. He won't come in the cell though. When we walk in that night, I'm yelling stupid shit at him. You know what I mean? And I'm drunk as a skunk and beamed out. Like, if anybody's ever been drunk and beamed out, you know, like, you do dumb shit. And when I used to wake up in the morning time, I would look around nervous, like not knowing what I did the night before. Like, is someone gonna stab me in the neck? Because it's a serious. There's a good possibility that I offended at least 10 people. And people, if I didn't have the respect I had and people didn't know that I could fight the way I fight, then it probably would have happened a few times. But when it comes down to it, I was a savage. So morning time comes around. This morning was different. So I wake up in the morning and there's a hornet's nest going on, right? So I don't know what's going on. Someone runs in my cell, and I'm sleeping with the freaking door open. I was all hungover and drunk and shit, and the door's open. I'm still in my bed like a fool. I wake up. No one ran in on me, though, which is good, because they had enough respect for me that they didn't do that. They didn't do me filthy like that. They couldn't anyways. There was so many of my friends there that if anything like that happened at the time, the white dudes were dominant, you know? So my boy runs in the cell, Shorty Mac. He's like, yo, Maddie, you got to go down here, bro. They got Justin in the cell, and they're fucking surrounding him, bro. They got 10, and they're trying to fucking, you know, they're pushing up on him. And so I go down there, and I'm like, what's up, man? I had one of my knives and shit, and I'm like, what's up, bro? You guys got a problem, bro? It's with me, not with him. You know what I mean? And Justin's like, man, I'm in here. Let's just go out there. And so I'm like, no. This is to do with me. And one of their dudes steps up to me all serious, like, yo, you go. He's like, yo, we're clearing out a cell. And he's like, you're going to go in the cell with one of my people. And I'm like, okay, yeah, line them up. I'll go in the cell with all your people. You line them up one after the other. We'll do this, bro. I ain't showing no fear. I'm going in there, no hesitation. And I'm not going to let my mind think of what's going to happen. I'm just going to do it and let myself, you know, deal with the consequences later, because that's just how you have to do it. So I go out to yard. Now it's when I come back in from yard, they're clearing out a cell and they're going to prepare everything, get it ready. I'm going to have one of my boys at the door. He's going to have one of his boys at the door, and we're going to watch so no one jumps in, because we had both of our groups of people had a lot of people there. I go out to yard and I come in on early first movement. And when I come in, they're already ready over in the corner. I walk over there and I go in, I take my shirt off, and I square up with the dude, bro, and we start banging out. Boom, boom, boom. Right away, I start wiping him down. I hit him, boom, 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 boom. And, you know, I wiped the dude down, and it wasn't good. Yeah. I'm not going to shit on him. So this is not about that. So anyways, I beat him up, and
they come in, they gotta clean the blood and stuff off the floor, so they get the cell cleaned up, everything's smooth. I come out and I take a shower, wash the blood off me and shit, and I go back to my cell, and my boy had been bringing in some shit, some morphine sulfates, and so I was kind of aching, like I had some aches and pains and shit, and he gave it to me like, here, just take a little bit of that. So I do it. That set off like a month-long tear of abuse. So I start doing morphine sulfate every day, sniffing big old lines of it, and that stuff is vicious, man. You can't even move when you're on it. Like, you have like motion sickness when you first start doing it because it's so strong. And I start doing it every day. Before I know it, I wake up one morning, I'm Cellies with my friend Nick, and I wake up at like 2 a.m. I decided not to do it anymore. He's like, oh, I don't want to do any pills no more. So I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do it with you. I'll just not do them. And it wasn't that simple. When I didn't do them, I woke up at 3 a.m. I jumped out of bed. My heart was racing. I sit on the toilet and I'm shitting, and it's like water. And I start getting nauseous. I had this like weird feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I start getting nauseous at the same time. So I'm literally shitting and puking through my legs. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? I thought I ate a bad meat stick. And I'm telling my boy I'm allergic to beef, so I shouldn't have eaten that. So now I'm thinking, damn, man, I got a vicious addiction to these pills. I'm not going to do them anymore. Like, I don't want to continue having a habit that's going to fuck me over like really bad like that. And so I stopped taking the pills for a little bit, and then my boy tells me, like, I think you're dope sick. And I'm like, nah, I'm not dope sick, bro. And he's like, yeah, I think you're dope sick. And I'm like, no, I'm not dope sick, bro. And he's like, yeah, I think you're dope sick. And I'm like, whatever, man. The next day, my boy comes over and I tell him what's going on with me, and he's like, here, try this. See if it makes you feel better. He gives me a little bit more. And so I'm like, I said I wasn't gonna do it, but I'm like, you know what? I felt so bad. I was in the shower, shitting in the shower, like shit coming out of my ass, like water in the shower. Like, it was bad. So I did this little thing, and immediately, like, as soon as it kicked in, I felt better. And I'm like, I told him what happened, and he's like, yeah. He's like, man, you're dope sick. So I'm like, damn, bro. Like, that, all that from just 1 month of getting high, like using it for a month. And he's like, yeah, man, you could have it happen in 3 days. 3 days is all you need. And I'm like, what? That's crazy, bro. So now I got a serious dope addiction. I'm not really sure what to think about myself. Like, in my head, I'm like, man, I'm a junkie. So I ended up getting lugged a little while later for a move team came to the unit, and they ran in this cell for booze and stuff like that. And I get to P2. And when I'm over in P2, this kid comes down one day. He's like, yo, you just got some heroin. And so I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, man, let me try that shit. So he gives me a gram, and all my friends had been doing heroin, and they had these things called binkies, like needles and shit. And so I took heroin, I put it in a spoon, and I told the kid come down, like, I'm like, yo, let me use that. And he was like, all right. And so he came down to my cell and let me use it. And I put the shit in the spoon, and I had the water in there, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I told him, I'm like, here, you got to do it. And so he takes it, cleans it out, and then sucks it up and puts it in and hits me. And when it hit me, I'm not going to lie, the first time I did it, it was kind of just like doing perks. It wasn't that good at dope. And I'm like, this shit's whack. There's nothing really here to talk about. But stupid me, I did it again anyways. And when I did it the next time, it was fire. This kid gave me a little tiny bag, and he was like, man, you don't do a lot of this shit. So I take it and I put it in this time it was a real syringe, and I had my own, and he gives it to me, and I suck it up, and I had somebody do it for me again. And when it hit me, I almost fell over. I was like, wave hit me like a wave. And from that point forward, a needle was part of my life. I wasn't afraid to use them anymore. I didn't have any stigma against them. And because everybody around me was doing it, I thought it was nothing wrong with it. So obviously you have those misgivings about it. Like, using a needle is not really what every person in the United States thinks is cool, right? But where I was at the time, I was at where I was in the time I was there, people did do it, and they did think it was all right, and so I did too. And I was, being a young kid that I was, I continued to do so. I shot pills, I shot dope, I shot Adderall, anything you could put it in water and shoot it, I did it. And that was all what started it right there. And I think that if you guys really want to hear more of my drug addiction stories, or how I ended up finding God in recovery, this story continues. That's only my first sentence. So the story continues on my next sentence, and it gets a little uglier. There's more fights, more the real violence, and the addiction gets, what I think is, more cleaned up. I started sniffing Suboxone and thinking it's better just because I'm sniffing it, but I was doing other things. I was shooting other things. As long as I had my own needle and I wasn't sharing it, I thought, it's fine, but it's not, man. And I want to get the response first. I want you guys to tell me that you're listening. I don't want to tell you this story for no reason. I don't want to tell you this story thinking like, oh yeah, it's for the views. It's not for the views, bro. This is for me to hopefully reach somebody else that has gone through this and feels like they can't tell anybody else about it because they feel like stigma against it in our circle, in our community, because people frown on it. They really do. People frown on it. It doesn't matter if you're a convict or if you're a citizen. Like junkies and drug addicts, people tend to frown on them. And I never acted like a junkie. Nobody knew I was getting high. It was a closet user. Nobody knew I was getting high, not even my mom, until one day I was sick at the house and I had to go on the methadone clinic. But nobody knew until it was time that I couldn't get any more because I had robbed everybody. And people were scared to just meet me. But I want to know that people are going to respond to this in a good way. I don't want to tell you my story and then be shit on for it. So if you want to hear more of it, then tell me. If not, don't say nothing and I won't make another one. That's all. Thanks for listening.